So every 4 years when the US men's national team poops the bed in the World Cup, former players, pundits, journalists, everyone starts to talk about the issues in US soccer youth development, right? When things are going well, no one talks about it, just this guy.
And I get labeled a hater.
But then when things go wrong, everyone knows what the problem is, everyone has a solution, everyone shows up and starts to talk about it, which is okay. But we have seen a lot of nonsense takes, right? We see people blaming pay to play, which to a certain extent, they're right. What if our best athletes played soccer? That's another crazy nonsense take that we see all the time and many others. And today I want to talk about all of that. I want to dive into the truth when it comes to US soccer youth development in men's soccer specifically. Like seriously, what's missing for the US men's national team to become a top team? Obviously, it's having good enough players, because even if you say our players are good, you're right, our players are good, but they're not good enough to make us a top team, like a top 10 team in the world. That's a fact, not an opinion. So don't worry, today I'm going to be yapping a lot, have a lot of thoughts on this topic, but it's not just me. I'm bringing a very special guest that knows a lot more than myself about this topic. Hello. If you're new here, I'm Filippo, and welcome to Tactical Manager TV. And today, I want to do a deep dive into the U.S. soccer youth development system for men's soccer here, I guess, in the United States. I don't have to say in the United States because I already said it's U.S. soccer. And my special guest for this video is no one less than Tom Bayer, the American that helped change Japanese soccer forever. He's called the godfather of Japanese soccer in Japan. He's very well respected worldwide, has done presentations for Ajax, FIFA, the Asian Confederation. He has done a ton of research also on youth development. I'm just going to say it as it is. This guy knows what he's talking about. And we're going to dive in and debunk a lot of the myths, right? Like the one about what if our best athletes played soccer, which it's not the problem. And even pay to play is the problem. We're going to dive into pay to play as well, because I don't think pay to play is the problem. It's a problem, but it's not the problem. Pay to play is here to stay, and it can still be there, and we can still do fine when it comes to youth development. That's why I say pay to play is not actually the problem. So sit back, relax, drop a like in this video if you haven't already. I will not be asking during my talk with Tom Bayer, so drop a like in this video right now and share it. Share it around. There will be a lot of good information in it. Tom Bayer is very knowledgeable on this topic, so make sure you share it, hit the like button, and that's all, okay? And this video is brought to you by Monarch, but more on that later. Okay, so I have a guest here that many of you, well, most of you should know Tom Bayer by now. He played a massive role in what Japanese football, Japanese soccer is today, more in like the youth level, the youth ranks. He is very well regarded in many football federations, soccer federations, FIFA, the Asian Federation. Unfortunately, the United States hasn't been too kind to you, Tom, have they? So far, at least.
Well, thank you for inviting me onto the show. Let's just say it's a love-hate relationship back and forth. But I have done some work with U.S. soccer, and you never know. There could be some things on the horizon. So that could be another show that we could talk about.
Hopefully. But anyhow, China even called Tom the godfather of Japanese soccer. And I mean, this guy has also done studies, worked with incredible people. A lot of teams like Ajax didn't work with Ajax, right? But they have had you.
They've invited me in. They've invited me into the boardroom. I've presented twice, so in a way, I have, because they've benefited from my knowledge and my understanding of the early child development.
Yes. So Tom Bayer will talk about a lot of this throughout the episode. And also, I'm probably going to put in the description, we've had Tom in the past on episodes where he specifically focuses on his research, his work, and everything. Today, we're not going to only focus on that. This is a different episode because, Tom, every time the United States men's national team fails, we start to see all the people that never criticize the program when things are going well come out, and they know exactly what the problem is with youth development in this country. So we see, what if our best athletes played soccer? Pay to play is the problem. MLS doesn't play young Americans. Coaches are bad. They start to know what the issues are, and I saw a lot of bad takes. I saw some very horrible takes when the World Cup ended, and most of the time I just stayed quiet. I just let it be. It's whatever. I've talked about this on the channel, but then I thought to myself, hey, the World Cup's over. Why don't I bring Tom so we can actually talk about this, address what many people claimed to be the issue, debunk
Yep.
a few, agree with others, and try to elaborate what is the problem with youth development in the United States, because it's something that me and you have experienced boots on the ground and also from the outside, right? We've done both of those. So, Tom, let me start with the first one, okay? When I was going through all these takes, the first one that comes up, we see the talking heads on media, the pundits, everyone talk about pay to play. And I'll explain very soon why pay to play is not the problem. I know that this is a very controversial take when we say pay to play is not a problem. It's not a problem, okay? I'll elaborate my point on why it's not a problem. I'm not saying I'm for soccer being expensive and exclusive. I want it to be inclusive. I don't want to exclude any demographic. But pay to play is not the problem. Tom, before I give my take, my full take, what are your thoughts on pay to play in the United States of America's youth soccer development?
Hey, it's me interrupting myself. Now, before we continue, a quick word from the sponsor of this video, Monarch. Do not go anywhere. We'll be back very soon.
You know, keeping my finances organized has lowered my stress levels over the years. And then recently I found out about Monarch, which improved all of that even more. And did you know that Monarch was the best budgeting app of 2025 according to the Wall Street Journal? And with our promo code TMTV, you will get 50% off your first year of Monarch Core at monarch.com. And listen, Monarch is a personal finance app that tracks everything. Accounts, investments, saving goals, and even spending. Well, obviously spending. That might even be the most important part of them all. You link all of your accounts in minutes. And then you see all your money, everything very well organized, very visual in different categorizations. Ever since I started using Monarch, it's been saving me time and money. And since time is money, it's been saving me money twice. And recently, what I've been using the most from Monarch is the AI assistant. Like, for example, I can ask the AI assistant, how much did I spend in traveling last summer? And then the AI assistant will say, $0 because you're broke, so you didn't travel. But if I did, it would tell me. I also like to use their AI insights because what's very interesting about it is that it can literally tell me if my spending actually went up or was it inflation. And usually it's inflation. So use the code TMTV at monarch.com to get your first year of Monarch Core half off at just $50. That's 50% off your first year at monarch.com with the code TMTV. Thank you very much, Monarch.
Well, I think you have to understand, first of all, what the actual argument is. Some people are saying that the pay-to-play model is the reason we're not developing players because of the exclusionary of not being able to include certain demographics. I think they're half right. They're right. First of all, if we could wave a magic wand for the pay-to-play to go away, I think we'd all be in agreement that everybody would vote for that.
Yes,
okay?
I
But
would.
that's not the single reason of why players aren't developing. And I think that the listeners or the people need to understand that, first of all, developing players and coaching players is not the same thing. Developing players in the countries that develop the top players, it's much more the role of culture that plays out and families of preparing players before they arrive to a team. The problem in the US is that after they arrive, people are trying to figure out what to do with these kids. And they don't understand that obviously this sport played with the ball on the ground, or at least with your feet, your lower body. You need to develop those neural pathways from a very, very young age. And a lot of people don't understand that. So they think that, the people who aren't so-called experts or think that they're experts think that just anybody can develop in this sport, regardless what the age is. But we all know if you know anything about the game, the early starters are the ones that benefit the most. There's just no doubt about that.
By early, you mean like even when they can walk, like 2-3-year-olds.
Yeah. So what's happening in these so-called football cultures is that they're just naturally going to be exposed to a ball from a much, much earlier age. And in many of these countries, football is the preferred number one sport. So you've got a culture of development that is very conducive to developing players, not because the coaching is any better. So this is the part that people have to understand. It's not because the result of coaching. Roy Keane said it, and he said it best. Skill was and never will be the result of coaching. It's a love affair between child and ball. So we've got these cultures where it's much more likely the child is going to come in contact with a ball from an early age. Now, that in itself is huge because the football world hasn't caught up to what science knows already. And that is that the learning and the teaching of these skills do happen much earlier than everybody supposed. It doesn't start from the time a child joins organized play, but it does in America in many areas. So a lot of kids will never have come in contact with a ball at their feet until they actually sign up and join a team at 6, 7, 8 years of age. So you've got two types of different kids. Some kids that are joining that have already mastered the basic building blocks. And I would argue that most of those are perhaps Hispanic kids in America that are coming from strong football cultures, Central America, Mexico, South America, and some of the European countries. So those kids are obviously going to have a tremendous head start. Now, if paired with a coach that has experience, that kid's going to benefit from good coaching. The kid that's at risk of dropping out, and the dropout rate is huge in America, is the kid that joins the team wanting to learn the basic building blocks. That kid is already starting behind the start line. So first we have to understand that. Now, what's the difference between developing players, their technical ability versus coaching kids? Well, this is where countries differ. These countries differ from identity, playing style, tactical principles, the tempo. That's the Brazilian way or the Spanish way that you play. You bring coaches in, and many in those countries, especially their cultures, are so strong. And the one that obviously comes to mind is Spain because they won the World Cup, and everybody's changing, and they're creating their task forces, and because now we got to play the Spanish way. The reality is, if you want to play the Pep Guardiola Spanish way, you literally almost have to become Pep Guardiola or become a Spanish president because the cultures are so different. So these countries have cultures in place that make it very, very much easier to learn from those coaches and pass that down over the many, many decades. In America, one of the problems is that we have, it's the old saying, too many cooks in the kitchen. We have such a different, vast array of opinions about how the game should be taught. Just look at our national team. Argentinian head coach, assistant coaches are all Spanish, and then you've got kids that are players that are scattered, some from the MLS, some playing in the earth. So it's not so easy to get everybody on something. So you hear these so-called experts saying, well, we've got to come up with our own way of playing, our own style, our own identity. That's not easy to do in a country that, boasts being, multicultural and everybody should have an opinion. And there's not just one way of doing things, there's many. But even with that argument, once you cut through all that, it still comes down to what is the quality of the players that you have available to play the way the coach wants them to play, a certain tactic, a certain system, a certain formation, a way to attack. And that's what the problem is. The problem is that it's like trying to build a Ferrari engine and you're using bicycle parts. And we're not getting the best parts to build the team because we've got players now on national teams in America that are at the pinnacle, that they're playing in World Cup tournaments, and they still have technical deficits. They haven't completely developed technically, but yet they're put into teams. So I don't know if I confused anybody too much, but for me, the way that you have to first approach this is understanding that there's a difference between developing the players, and those are the technical skills. That's the DNA of a player. If you want to know quickly, let's say you're a coach or a parent and you inherit, you volunteer to coach your kids under 10 team. You show up your first training and you've got 20 kids. You know what the quickest way to see what the level of these kids is? Put them into a 1v1. Set up a lot of 1v1 stations and let them play 1v1. That's like putting them under a microscope. You'll see quickly who the players are and who the players aren't. And so when you go to those countries, that again, Spain, because they were the ones that won the World Cup, the level of the players that are entering into football at the youngest ages, 6 and 7, they're so good technically already that now they're like sponges. They can learn how to, move players, create space by moving the ball around. They can understand combination play. How do I combine with my teammate? And they're doing this at the youngest ages, where our kids are joining teams at these young ages, and it's the old saying, chewing, walk and chew bubble gum at the same time.
And
So it's not easy.
and I was gonna say, to hop on all the things you just said about the pay to play. The reason I say pay to play is not the problem is as follows. So everyone understands. When you said if we have a magic wand right now and we can just make every single soccer club, soccer school, soccer academy, everything in the US for free, would I do it? I would 100% do it.
Me
I
too.
would 100% be for it. If I had $1 trillion and I could just fund all of that, I would 100% do it.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I can't pay for that. Okay, I haven't made it there, and I don't think I'll ever make it to that. And I'm sure Tom will do the same. But we don't have $1 trillion to spend on that.
That's right.
But here's the thing: why I say pay to play is not the problem. One, you talked about the cultural aspect of it. To me, it's culture because even if you have a pay to play model, um, if you're developing from a cultural standpoint so many talented players, eventually some will rise to the top. The second thing is every country has pay to play. They have pay to play in Brazil. They have pay to play in Spain. They have to pay to play in England. And they're going to say, but it's cheaper there. Well, things in the U.S., for the most part, it is more expensive. There's more disposable income here, right? So that's a natural reason to why it is. But my point with the pay to play is this. So, Tom, let's say tomorrow I am the president of the United States, okay? And I go and I just sign an executive order where it is prohibited to charge for soccer. You can no longer charge for soccer. So if I do that tomorrow, what's going to happen is all the pay to play soccer schools, they're not going to turn free. They're going to disappear.
Yep.
That's what's going to happen. Okay, they're going to disappear. Once they disappear, what do you have left? The free academies, which we have in the US now. We have like 28, 29. Like we have 30 MLS teams, but not all of them have free academies. I think 29 have free academies. I don't know if Minnesota has one. But let's say every MLS team has a free academy. That's 30 in an entire country. London, that has 9 million people, has 17 free academies. London. So what's the point I'm making here? Pay to play can stay. And you can continue to charge thousands of dollars because not every kid will be good enough to play soccer at a high level. And if I'm a parent and I want to pay for my kid to play soccer, what is the problem with that? The problem we have in the US nowadays, ignore the culture thing that you said for a second, which all of that is true, is even if we have that you just mentioned, we don't have enough free academies in the US. I don't think 30 academies for a country of the size of the US is enough to scout all the talent that could come from like a soccer starts at home program. You need more. And it is very hard to do that when it's kind of monopolized, the federation with Major League Soccer, like no promotion relegation, not an actual soccer pyramid with parachute payments, all of it that we could dive into, but it's not a topic of this video. My overall point is the pay to play, yeah, it does exclude demographics, and you obviously do miss out on talent there. But tackling the pay to play will not resolve all the issues you talked about in regards to culture. We can have the free academies tomorrow. The reality is, I know people are going to disagree with this, but because we don't have the culture of kids playing at a young age and we don't really educate parents on that, what happens is you could have all the free academies you wanted in this country, and usually the academies start at the U13 level. Earlier than that, it's even in other countries, they do pay a little bit, like the futsal and all that, but it's cheaper. It's funded through the pyramid, right? The open pyramid. Usually that funds all those academies and scouts and everything. Ultimately, what's going to happen if you remove the pay to play is you're not going to solve the problem. So that to me means pay to play is not the problem. Now, if you can get more free academies through a merit-based system and fix the culture, the amount of talent that's going to come up is off the charts. That's why I don't think pay to play, when people are like, it's too expensive here in the US. And then Alexi Lalas always shows up and says something like, who's going to pay for it? And guys, I'm not the guy that I barely agree with Alexi Lalas. But is he not right? Like, you can't just go to a soccer business and tell the guy, hey, Tom, you have a soccer school? Yeah, work for free. It doesn't work that way. You have to find ways, and everyone pay attention to this, you have to find ways to incentivize free academies through an open system. And then on top of that, you do need to implement what Tom was talking about culture. If you put those two together, you have the free academies that make it inclusive, and you have culture. That's how you get an abundant amount of players. Tom, is there anything else you want to add on the pay to play, or can I put the other topic up?
No, a couple of things, extra things I think I'd like to add. Um, and that is that one of the other reasons that the pay to play exists is because kids are arriving, a majority of them, with absolutely no basic fundamentals. So what are they paying for? They're paying for the so-called expert professional coach that's going to coach your little 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old. Now, think about it this way. If you've got a huge army of little kids that by the age of 5 and 6 are skilled at ball mastery, and you're the volunteer father or mother that show, and you inherit 25 little 6-year-olds that are all very technically proficient already, there's not a lot of coaching that has to go on. What I would recommend is I would set up my pitch every day and they just play mini games, and that would be it.
Rondos, mini games, some situations,
Well,
right? You create situations, yeah.
Well, you don't really even need to coach it then. When you've got 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old kids that are very good technically, there's very little coaching that has to go on. The reason that the coaching is going on is that, and why the pay-to-play coaches think it's relevant, is because they're paying to try to fix what perhaps a little $10 ball in the backyard or in the living room would have fixed already had they gotten the early head start. Most kids don't. So they're starting with a deficit once they cross over the line into organized play. Do you really think that at the youngest ages, I'm talking 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, do you really think that the coaching is that much better in those countries that are traditional football cultures? Well, tell me, you're Brazilian. So are kids getting better coaching at 6, 7, 8 years of age?
I can tell you that in Brazil, no. The coaching, and I mean, the thing with bad coaching in Brazil, what's funny is that it's very much recognized by Brazilians that the coaching in Brazil is not good. And then people are going to say, but Brazil has gotten worse. Guys, Brazil's a complex topic that we can, I made a whole separate video about the struggles of Brazil. You talking about Brazil getting worse, it's still a very high standard where Brazil has one of the best forwards that plays for Real Madrid. They have one of the best forwards that plays for Barcelona. They had the Champions League final had 2 center backs, one in each team, the best center back of each team, Brazilian. So when you say Brazil's worse, you look at the players that they have and you're like, wouldn't you want those players for the U.S.? So that is fine. But the coaching at the youth ranks in Brazil, if you exclude the volunteer coaches in the U.S. that are like, he's like a baseball guy helping on soccer. Let's talk about guys that are involved in soccer in the U.S. I don't think the coaching in the U.S. is worse than Brazil. From what I've seen.
Same thing here in Japan. If you come around and spend time here in Japan, you'll see that the majority of kids that are coached between the ages of 6 and 12, which is one phase of development here, it's all volunteer and experienced dads. But you'll see unbelievably good technical players. And again, why? Because these technical skills aren't the result. It's not resulting in some kind of fantastic genius coaching going on. There's cultures of overcoaching here in Japan. So you could look at it in a completely different way. Here in Japan, one of the main reasons Japanese players are so good technically is because there's a culture in place that will accept when a little 6-year-old joins a team, he or she will be required to train 4 times a week, 3 hours a training session, 12 months a year. There's no on-off season. And they accept what I call the unintended consequences of collateral damage. What's that? What am I talking about? Japan accepts that from the overtraining, we've got injuries, we've got burnout, we've got mental health issues. This is the way countries operate. Countries will accept certain behaviors that other countries won't accept. So if you think that you're going to send a bunch of people from around Asia to Japan and study and then you're dreaming, because culture is the driver. So it's the same thing like you were saying about in Brazil. The players are arriving once you formalize organized play. These kids have already mastered the ball. They don't really need a lot of good quality of coaching because, as they say in Europe, the ball and the game is the teacher. Yeah, it's the teacher when you've got an army of players that have already mastered the ball. Then
Tom,
yes.
Let me put this on screen for you, and this is a good. We were gonna topic number 4 is coaching, but I want to put a video here since we got a little bit ahead of ourselves. Look at this video, and you that are watching
Yeah, I
this right
saw
now.
this the other day. I know the kid's
Yeah.
gonna.
I'm
Yep.
gonna I'm gonna put a quick clip here for y'all. This is a kid in Brazil. I think he's like 6 or 7.
Yep.
And the overall point that me and Tom are making here is yes, coaching does matter over the long run, and good coaches do elevate the players. But it's very easy to go in the youth ranks and blame coaches for not developing technical players or talented players. I'm going to put a clip of this kid, and my question to you watching this is what freaking coach taught this to this kid? No one taught this kid how to do what he does on this clip. It's not something that you learn from a coach at this age, you learn from culture. And let me just play the clip. Look at this. Right, let me just put this down. Look at this. Like, how does a coach teach this? You don't teach something like this, right? Like, how do you teach this to someone, right?
No.
It's just something that, again, we're gonna get to coaching in a second because that's also one of the arguments from the expert. That's like, oh, coaching is the problem at the youth ranks. Like, you can get the best coaches in the world if a 6, 7-year-old arrives with never have kicked the ball in his life. It doesn't matter. You can give a 7-year-old that never kicked the ball to Pep Guardiola. He won't freaking know what to do with that kid. And I'm not blaming the kids, obviously. That's not their fault. I'll give you another example, Tom, because you talked about the next topic will be what if our best athletes played soccer. But before I get to that, one thing that people underestimate about soccer, because let me put it this way, and this is another one that I saw actually JJ Watt arguing this with his wife and on a podcast, and I forgot her name. She was right. JJ Watt was wrong. So what she was saying essentially is that it's easier to start to play football at age 15 than soccer or basketball. All right. And I was like, first when I heard that from her, I'm like, and I'm paraphrasing, right? I don't know exactly the words she used, but it was something along those lines. And when I was listening to that, I was like, she's right. And they laughed at her mostly in the podcast. But overall, the point she was trying to make is this. And anyone that's played soccer and I played flag football, right? I never played football, but I played basketball, right? I played basketball a lot. I still play basketball. If you let's get an athletic person, okay? Get an athletic 15-year-old, fast, can jump, coordinated, can move well. And you put him to play basketball for like a month, and then he goes into pickup. He will struggle, but he'll be able to catch the ball. He'll be able to pass the ball. He'll be able to play defense. He's going to struggle. That's obvious, right? If you get someone that never played soccer before and put him to train for 1 month and put him in a pickup game with, like, let's say a high school team, not even putting a high level, a high school team, he won't play. He simply will not play, right? I think like it was Joel Embiid that started playing basketball later in his life when he was like a teenager, and he's one of the best players in the NBA, Joel Embiid. If it's literally impossible for you to go professionally in soccer if you start at age 15. I'll bet any money in the world. If you never played soccer before and you play at age 15, it doesn't matter how athletic you are, you'll never go professional. Never. Actually, if you start at age 15, you might struggle to make the high school team, even if you're super athletic.
Yeah, and the reason why is because football is a sport that's developed from the trunk down, from the waist down. All the other sports are developed from the waist up. Over the head sports with balls. The only sport in the world played with a ball on the ground is football. So that early head start is what's paramount. If you don't get that, if you don't build those neural pathways between the feet and the brain, which is the furthest distance, then you're starting from a disadvantage. And that's the reason why you can basically see also that football is more of a foundational sport that can actually help other sports become much better versus the reverse. It's different. We find now that's a whole different topic, but now we find that, okay, our best players aren't playing football. That's a load of baloney. We've got, first of all, millions of kids that play. You're telling me that some of the best athletes, first of all, they aren't even deemed good athletes yet because they're joining at the age of 6 or 7. And first of all, speed, strength, coordinate is not a predictor of whether you're going to be a top football player or not. The one overall component is technical ability. That outweighs everything. There's been research been done about it. We can put the links up so that they can see the research that's been done. But they have debunked this whole idea that athleticism, the best athletes aren't going to. But even if they were, that's not a predictor of how good a player is going to become. And so again, you've got people who are so-called experts that aren't experts, that are, weighing in on things that they just absolutely don't have any idea about.
And this one I want to debunk quickly. What if our best athletes played soccer? Because we see that claim every 4 years when the U.S. men's national team fails in the World Cup. They say the reason we're not good at soccer is because our best athletes don't play soccer. And I have a lot to debunk that. One, when it comes to pure athleticism, by multiple metrics, the U.S. men's national team in the World Cup was among the best. Right,
Yeah.
I'll bring up one, but even if you look at top speed, like Balogun was one of the fastest players in the World Cup, for example, our center forward. Weston McKennie, most of the duels won, ground covered. So by most metrics, when you look at it, Alex Freeman, by most metrics, the U.S. men's national team had one of the most athletic teams. And this is another metric that I just brought up. Team running distance per 90 minutes, okay? The United States is number one.
Yeah.
Right, we're number one by quite a bit, actually. We're number one, and then look at Spain right here, and look at Argentina, even that made it to the final. France, there's not much of a, and ultimately when they brought this up, the result is that there's no meaningful relationship between distance covered and success in the World Cup. If you look on the bottom right there. So why did I bring this up? Well, I mean, look, when we're measuring athleticism, a lot of things come into mind. It's like size, and in terms of size, the U.S. is a big team, right, compared to many others, compared to the Spanish team, for example. Distance covered is a good example of athleticism, right? If you can cover more ground, run more. Speed, which we had fast players like Freeman, Balogun, Way as an athletic player. Pulisic is actually quick. Christian Pulisic, a lot. So Anthony Robinson. By most metrics, the U.S. men's national team was among the most athletic teams in the World Cup. I'm not saying top 3, top 4, top 5, but top 10, right? But we're not a top 10 team. And then when we talk about our best athletes playing soccer, our best athletes don't play volleyball. Our best athletes don't swim. Our best athletes don't do track and field, right? By the definition, because the claim is our best athletes go to the most popular sports. Track and field's not the most popular sport. Neither is swimming. Neither is gymnastics. Our best athletes, based on the claim they go to football, basketball, maybe baseball, but mainly those two, right? Basketball and football. So in the Olympics, we do well in all other sports without our quote-unquote best athletes. And on top of that, Tom, if we're going to use the best athletes argument, let me ask you one thing. If we go to other countries in the world, like let's say Cameroon, Serbia, Greece, do their best athletes play basketball? I don't think so, right? Like that's not the number one sport. It's popular, but it's not the number one sport. And when I looked up, and listen, guys, I know the United States is still the best country in the world when it comes to basketball.
Yep.
I follow the NBA. I watch the Olympics, FIBA World Cup as well. They're the best. I have no doubt. But you can see here that other countries are developing what would be in soccer the Ballon d'Or winners, right? We have the last few NBA MVPs. So we have the Greek freak, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Jokic winning it twice, Joel Embiid, that was even developed a little bit in the U.S. He played for the Monteverde Academy here. Jokic again. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's from Canada, which in that sense we could even place U.S.-Canadian system. But my point here is other countries, even though it's not their number one sport and maybe their best athletes are going towards soccer, which is the number one sport there, they still developed players in basketball that are Ballon d'Or winners, right? The MVP. How close is the United States from developing a Ballon d'Or winner in men's soccer? We're not at all, like nowhere close. Like it's insane to even think about it. So the whole thing of what if our best athletes played soccer, that's not the issue. That's not the issue.
And just to add to that, because there's some really interesting actual research that's been done about this. It's not just talking heads. There's actually research with empirical data, proof of concept. There was a study done back in 2017, I believe it was. It was by a professor, Professor Robbie Wilson from the University of Queensland. Okay. He comes from the School of Biological Sciences. Okay. This guy's the real deal. He moved down to Brazil to do this research. And I'm just looking at some talking points here because I'm not an expert in it. So I always want to make sure that I am quoting the experts, not myself. But the first sentence in this article: a football player's performance on the field is determined by their skill rather than their athletic ability, researchers from the University of Queensland found. It goes on. A new study led by Professor Robbie Wilson used analytical techniques developed in evolutionary biology to determine the impact of a player's skill, athletic ability, and balance on their success during a game. The researchers found it was their skill, not speed, not strength or fitness, that was the most important factor. And just a little bit more, bear with me. Higher skill allows players to have a greater impact on the game, Professor Wilson said. Accurate passing, greater ball control are more important for success than high speed, strength, and fitness. It may be obvious to football fans and coaches that players like Lionel Messi, Neymar are the best due to their skill. However, 90% of the research of football players is based on how to improve their speed, strength, agility, and not their skill. So this is stuff, and it goes on, says Professor Wilson was collaborating with the elite football academies in Brazil, where he's testing new protocols for skill development for junior players. And his research shows that skill is fundamental to player success in the sport. So if we understand this, and get off this high horse of the best athletes aren't playing football. Well, it seems like even if they are, it doesn't seem to be a big predictor in what the success is going to be with the players.
And Tom, just so people don't take us out of context here, of course, if you have the top skill and you can be the number one in terms of athleticism, that's great. Like
Yes.
if you're, of course, like you get like a Kylian Mbappe, that the technical level is unbelievable, but then he has all that pace. That's brilliant, right? Then you get like the world-class players that obliterate the opponents. But the overall point is, if you go through Spain that won the Euros and won the World Cup, they're obviously very athletic players, obviously, right? Especially when it comes to stamina with them. But I wouldn't say their best trait is athleticism. I can name many teams that are more athletic than Spain. Argentina is more athletic than Spain. England's more athletic than Spain. France is more athletic than Spain. Right? And Spain won the World Cup. They have extremely high soccer IQ. The players are super intelligent on the field and technical ability. Now, obviously, France can beat them. England can beat them. They can all do so. But the overall point is that it's not just get your best athletes to play. If you get the LeBron Jameses and all those like incredible athletes that we have in the United States of America, Odell Beckham Jr., and they start playing soccer at age 6 or 7, they're not going to be Neymar. They're not going to be Mbappe. They're not going to be Dembele. They're not going to be Messi. It's just not going to happen. Are they going to be good players? Yes, because obviously being as athletic as some of these guys are, that will make a difference on the field. Of course, we're not insane. Of course, athleticism matters, right? But the overall point is that it's not the number one. Yeah. And we lack with that culture, especially because we don't like if you're a mom, a dad, an uncle watching this video right now, the best way you can help your son, your nephew, whatever it is when they're at ages 2, 3, they start walking, play with them soccer. They have to be introduced early and get those fundamentals. You can't just bring them at age 6, 7 to a coach and hope the coach will just magically make them play soccer. That's not how it works.
The other thing, if you look at the makeup of most traditional clubs throughout the United States, these mega clubs, I've worked with them in North Carolina and other areas in the United States. The youngest ages, actually, the financial barrier for young kids to get in isn't nearly as expensive as it is for the older kids. But yet they're still not developing at those younger ages. I'm talking about 5, 6, 7 years. Many clubs have what they call rec team. There's a whole league. It's traditionally all volunteer moms and dads. They don't get paid. So most of the clubs throughout the United States, you've got hundreds of thousands of kids that are starting to play, and they're basically playing in these so-called rec leagues, because I've worked with some of the clubs, and there's a very little barrier to entering into that.
What ages, Tom, roughly?
Well, the youngest, there's a lot of 4, 5, 6-year-old kids. They're everywhere in America. Everywhere, almost every major club that is a major pay-to-play model that pays thousands at the upper end. At the bottom end of the pyramid, it's super cheap. It's super cheap. And it's run by mostly volunteer moms and dads. I know, because I work in that space. I've done endless amounts of, and so what happens is, because these clubs haven't understood and identified that those youngest ages is the golden age for skill acquisition between 2 and 5 years of age. Right now, There's so much work now that's come research that's been done, that there's a bright light. And that's a lot of the work that I do now, is educating parents, of getting them to work with their kids at the youngest ages, way before they cross over the line into organized play. But having said that, there's still tons and tons of groups, like a group like North Carolina FC, or these Arlington Association. They've got thousands of kids that are playing at the youngest ages. They organize 4, 5, 6 years of age. And the barrier to getting in is super, super cheap, man, because the parents they're all volunteer parents. And so I think maybe that's something that a lot of people don't understand. That we complain about the pay to play, but at the very, very early stages, it's not that expensive to actually enter in to these organized clubs. It's when you get onto the old, the travel team, and then you're getting into the so-called or elite programs. That's where the expense is ridiculous. But these kids who are playing, like even at the YMCA, the rec leagues in parks and recreation, the barrier is super, super cheap. We don't put enough emphasis on this. Because there's like a disdain. For some reason, there's an image in America that the kids that play in these so-called rec programs are the kids that don't have potential. They're not the one. They're the kids that are never going to turn into becoming good players. But we should offer them some kind of programming where, what I always say is, the work that we're doing, the soccer starts at home, football starts at home, would actually make those organizations much more important. And they're not today. And there's thousands of kids playing all over America at a very, very cheap cost, which to me proves, again, it's not a problem with the pay to play. Of course it is, when excluding. Every kid should have the right, and we are excluding a lot. But that's a whole different argument and a whole different problem. But it's not the problem of why we're not developing world-class players.
Yeah, the thing with pay to play, we both agree that excluding people and not being an inclusive sport is a problem. The overall point that I was making, at least early on, is that the problem is not pay to play existing. It's always going to exist, and it should exist. It's that for those very talented kids that have started and are starting to develop and get better and better with age, at ages 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7, and they're like super talented by then, you need more free academies and not eliminate the pay to play. Right? You need to create a pyramid and a system that incentivizes more free academies, and that comes from the federation.
It does. I think also it's important for the listeners to understand there's a big difference between just joining a club, and as soon as I hear the word academy, I think elite. That's elite. Mm-hmm. So there should be, in the perfect world, which we don't exist in, there should really be no really elite academy that people should be paying for. Mm-hmm. Once they're identified, because there's a purpose, they're identifying them because eventually they think that that they can develop a professional player that's going to make a lot of money for the club. So as soon as you say the word elite, and this is the problem, that word elite is used in such a loose way throughout America and some of these different organizations and governing bodies that are focused and they portray to be elite organizations. Well, you can't have an elite program. You can't call it, this is my personal opinion, you can't call any program elite if people are paying for it. What's elite about it? It's a pay to play as well. So this is the problem, is that we've been kind of bamboozled into this idea that you've got to play on the travel team. That's the elite player team. But then you got to pay. So, I mean, that's a whole nother, the one way that you could probably bypass this is that if you got the U.S. government with the stroke of a pen, an executive order by a president to basically say one thing, this would be the game changer, that at the elementary school level throughout the United States, they will allow sports teams to be operating, and they don't. It's probably different than when I grew up, but in New York, where I grew up, elementary schools don't operate any sports teams. There's nothing. They don't exist.
No, they in Florida. Look, in the U.S., each state might be different, right?
Exactly.
And when it comes to school, it's very local.
Yes.
In Florida, elementary schools, unless it's like an academy school or a charter school, something separate, a prep school, the public schools, they do not have any teams operating it.
No, they don't, and that's a majority of the United States throughout the whole country. Mm-hmm. So you've got facilities, You've got, hey, we could arguably say that America has the most futsal courts in the entire planet because every school has a gymnasium. Every school.
Not
Near.
elementary here in Florida, but every middle school, high school, yeah, they all
Well,
do.
you're right, regionally, but
Yeah.
because Florida being in the, seasonal, the weather that you have there. But bro, as soon as you get above that, I mean, most all Central America, in America, the central part, the West, the North, we have tens or if not hundreds of thousands of gymnasiums around the world. The problem is nobody can use them because, again, this is another cultural problem. I mean, this thing runs really deep. Cultural problem because here in Japan, and I always say, I'm sitting in my living room, I'm pointing out this window right here is my son's elementary school, 1st grade to 6th grade. 6 years of age to 12 years, you spend your life over here. As soon as you graduate and you turn 13, out this window, you can see the other school, okay? They both have football grounds, both of them, okay? The cost for their teams, because these are not teams that are run by the schools, they're run by nonprofit organizations, but this field and this field, all the teams use it, and the cost is zero, nothing, zilch, there's no pay, okay? Now, they open those fields up too for just the public to come in and use. In America, we have tort laws that if you walk onto some private property and you fall over out of your own clumsiness and stub your toe or fall down and break your leg, you might be awarded $1 million because the gate wasn't shut. So it's a culture thing, man. What I'm saying is that if we don't have also in the United States where we're spending billions of dollars to combat something like child obesity, child diabetes, child coronary disease. So there's no real strategy of trying to convince governments that have billions of dollars for education that playing sports in these schools and being more flexible about facilities is actually a good thing for the country.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my approach. That's why I try, and I work in countries where basically we do bring together the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Sports, the Ministry of Education. And it might be high time to be able to use, because bro, this is a problem that nobody's talking about. New York City schools alone, between 1st grade and 12th grade, 50% of the children can't pass a standardized reading test. These are facts. 70% of the kids, 1st grade to 12th, can't pass a standardized mathematical test. Do you know what the annual budget in New York City schools are on an annual once a year?
Billion?
40 billion with a B. If you don't believe me, Google it. Anybody right now. New York City school system annual school budget. $40 billion with a B. Now, a few years back, my work with the Houston Dynamo and the University of Houston, we studied a couple of different cohorts of children, okay? This is a research project. I'm not talking just like a flimsy, no. This was with fidelity built into it, an actual university that had a laboratory called Houston Dynamo Soccer Starts at Home Research Laboratory. What that laboratory was set up to do was to study the impact of ball mastery on 6-year-old children. Because what ball mastery is creating and developing is a child's cognitive skills to focus, pay attention, and control an object with their feet, which is the ball, which is a mental cognitive skill. Now, marry into this the work that I personally, that's how I can talk about this, because I know what I know because I've done it, is that I've worked and I've collaborated with Dr. John Rady, one of the foremost neuropsychiatrists on planet Earth from Harvard Medical School, who basically wrote 14 pages in my book. And I'm not promoting a book to pay. I give it away free. Anybody wants it, we'll put the PDF file in there and you can get it for free. But why this is important is because Dr. Rady wrote in the book that he believed that ball mastery of a child playing with a ball, and this isn't specialization, this is just a foundational movement program to get kids active. He wrote in the book that he believed that this could improve a child's cognitive, social, emotional, and physical skills. But even more important, the part of the brain that's responsible for ball mastery is the same part of the brain that's responsible for thinking, remembering, reading, and what we call number configuration. So we held a research project over 2 years in Houston, And we studied the effects of ball mastery with a program that we developed in physical education classes by accrediting teachers in ball mastery and working with parents who created a feedback loop. So ball mastery at home, ball mastery at school, ball mastery at school, ball mastery. And we increased and improved their test scores in reading and mathematics. If you don't believe it, then you have to read it to believe it. But I lived it. I lived it because I was on calls in the wee hours of the morning for several years working in this research project. So what I'm saying is that unless we start connecting the dots and showing parents the byproducts, the benefits from starting kids out from playing football. Now, you'll automatically, we've got families in the United States that just love the sport, soccer. We've got a multicultural, diverse society in America. But a majority of parents aren't going to run up to put their kid in a soccer program because soccer is the world's game. Now, it might be different now, World Cup, a lot of enthusiasm, and history shows us that we do get a big bump after a World Cup. People are interested in it. But I can tell you this much. Parents aren't waking up in the morning thinking, how can I improve little Timmy's first touch on a football? Or how can I improve little Mary's shooting or passing or receiving? But from a young age, because you're required to use your feet and you're required to control an object with your feet, there's tremendous benefits that come with that. Just teaching a child how to pay attention is a superpower. You don't have a different brain for playing football or reading or writing or mathematics. It's the same brain. And that's the reason why Harvard University and Stanford University became interested in this concept of soccer starting at home. And because they weren't interested in the soccer component, they're interested in the parent-child relationship and attachment, and they're interested in the cognitive skills being developed. So if you put one and one together, it adds up to two, then you would be able to start understanding that we need to be able to approach a strategy that's a very holistic, where it's a win-win. The educators win, the health of families win, parent-child interaction win, and develop a strategy that will inspire and motivate parents to get their kids off to that early head start. Because we can bring all the best coaches in the world that we want, whether it's Pochettino, whether it's Pep Guardiola, just name them all. You can bring them to the United States. But the reality is most of them will be rendered useless because a majority of the kids are so poor technically, because those are the basic building blocks. That's the development that doesn't take place. We're good on the coaching side. We've got an obsession with coaches. We've got an obsession with coaches' education. We have thousands and thousands and thousands of licensed coaches in the United States. We have thousands and thousands of imported coaches in the United States. But the players can't benefit from it because they don't have the basic building blocks. Some do, but not enough where we can close that gap like Spain has. Spain has such an elite player pool because they've been able to close the gap between the very best and the worst. And that's when your elite player pool explodes. America is so huge, the gap between the very best and the worst is an ocean apart. That's my philosophy, the way I see it.
Essentially, a lot of it comes down to what we were talking about, culture at the early ages, right? But what you're also advocating for is that if we could implement it in the elementary school system, it's not just about soccer, right? It goes beyond that too. I want to go through one thing here, which is honestly the last portion that I want for this video to go through here, because we dived into pay to play, we dived into youth coaching, we dived into what if our best athletes played soccer. And then I've seen some takes like this, and I'm far from an MLS show. I'm far from promoting MLS, but I want to defend MLS here because Andrew Carlton was essentially blaming MLS for the most part. He said MLS does not play Americans or young Americans. They need to stop signing foreigners and this and that. I want to say a few things about this, right? The whole MLS does not play Americans. I'm going to read his actual quote. If you go to his Twitter, you can see the entire video and you can draw your own conclusions. I would argue in favor of MLS. I think MLS does play the best Americans that they can. I can go through a few names right now that come from the top of my head. Like even this season, right? Julian Hall, Kevin Sullivan, Matthew Dos Santos, Adri Mehimeri, Neil Pierre, Bombino, Taha Habron, Duran Farid, the goalkeeper from San Diego. And even if you go a few years ago, they were playing a young Brendan Aronson, a young Paxton Aronson, a young Ricardo Pepi. They played a young Tyler Adams. So this whole thing of MLS is not playing. They're playing the best American players. I do think MLS fails a lot in the youth ranks, which we talked a little bit about that. And the other thing I want to add is also once the player's already 17, 18, 19, it's almost like too late at this point. They are who they are. They're going to improve. They're going to develop. But the technical foundation, they are who they are at this point, right? You're not going to make this huge jump out of nowhere at ages 17, 18, 19. Again, obviously players improve as their careers go on. I'm not crazy. A 25-year-old player is usually better if he develops than the 17-year-old version of that same player. But the big jump is earlier in life. But this is what Andrew Carlton had to say, Tom. I'm just going through it because his video went viral. I didn't want to talk about it on Twitter because I feel like we have to elaborate a point. But it was just like, guys, seriously, let's just go through this. Former MLS midfielder and U.S. Youth International Andrew Carlton shared his perspective on the debate surrounding youth development in the United States of America's Twitter. He said, "The youth system is not the problem." And I think this first quote right here, Tom, we mostly agree, right? It's before the youth system. Yes. The youth system on its own is not the problem. I do think we could have more free academies. That would help, right, with the whole pay-to-play problem. But the issues before. So far, he's right? It's not the youth system. But then he says, anyone telling you that either doesn't know what they're talking about or they're protecting MLS. That I don't know. The U.S. men's national team will never become an elite national team as long as MLS continues to spend millions on young foreign players instead of giving meaningful minutes to young Americans. This is what I was talking about, of where sometimes stupidity comes in, and I apologize for calling him kind of stupid for this quote. MLS is a business, Tom, all right? And it's much cheaper to develop a player than it is to pay 10, 20 million for a prospect. Do we agree with that?
Sure.
Right? So does he think that MLS spends million on young foreign players because they want to sabotage the young American player? Or they're spending millions on that young foreign player, whether it is from South America, Europe, whatever it is, or are they spending those millions because there are better players there?
Yeah.
Right? Like, this is just, I don't know, man. It's like, that's what I'm saying, where some things don't make sense. I would love for him to clarify this, but are you interpreting it the same way I am, or am I going crazy?
Yeah, I mean, it's subjective, right? I mean, the reality is that MLS clubs, there are certain clubs that give more opportunities and more minutes to American players. Philadelphia would
like every club in every world, like every league.
Yeah, they are. But then there are some clubs that, the biggest thing is that MLS is unusual in this way. Almost every other country, at least out here in Japan, there's a quota. It's strict. You're only allowed, there's a limit, there's a limit to how many foreign players you can have in your starting 11. I think it's 3. Might be +1 if it's an Asian foreign player. So for the majority part, I should have done a little bit of homework before this, but I didn't think I was going to need this. But somewhere in this book here, my notebook or one of my notebooks, I did a comparison of the MLS and the J League. And I saw that, oh my goodness, you can't even compare the amount of Japanese players playing in the J League versus the Americans that are playing in the MLS. It's so flip-flop. It's so heavy on
But
foreign.
Tom, let me ask you a question about that, because I agree with you. I think there should be some restrictions on the amount of foreign players in the league. But it goes back to my point. MLS is a business. They don't want to spend money. They want to make money. So would MLS not play more Americans if we had better young American players? Would they
100%.
not just
100%? And I think eventually, you'd like to think eventually, with the investment that they are putting into these academies, that they are trying to figure that out. But you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, professionals are only as good as their last game that they played, especially head coaches. So they're not risk adverse. They're not going to throw some players on just to develop them. Some will, but that comes down to the ethos and the culture at the club. Are you a club that's trying to develop and sell players, or are you just trying to win trophies? There is a big distinct difference between them.
But Tom, let me finish his whole quote here, because I just want to go through this whole thing about blaming MLS. Like, every MLS club has talented academy players. I agree. Yeah, they do. Who sign homegrown deals, fans get excited, then those players spend the next 3 to 4 years sitting on the bench or in MLS Next Pro. That happens in every country in the world. There's waste of talent everywhere. There's teams that don't. You mentioned it, right? There's teams that develop, teams that don't develop. But again, the saying MLS doesn't play these players is not true. I named a bunch of players from this season right now, teenagers playing in MLS. They are playing the talented young Americans, right?
Yeah.
For the most part. Some clubs do a terrible job, some do better jobs. That's normal in every country. But then he says by the time they're 21, 22, the window to become truly world class is gone. This is where I think he gets it all wrong. The window for them to being truly world class was already gone by the time they reached MLS.
Yeah.
It starts much earlier at ages 2, 3, 4. You look, if you start playing soccer at ages 7 or something, can you still become a professional player? Yes, you can still become a professional player. You will not be the Neymars, the Messis, the Mbappes, the Harry Kanes if you start playing later. The window to be truly world class is gone by the time you're 18 if you're not at that level. But go ahead, sorry.
Well, yeah, there's an interesting study, and again, you can maybe throw this up on your site here. In last October, the Scottish Football Association put out a 133-page white paper. They went around the world. They studied. They went to all the biggest elite academies, both on the professional side and on the federation side, and they studied. It was called Trends in the Success of Developing Elite Players. And they came out and they listed 22 players, the who's who, the Messis, Ronaldos, Mbappe, Haaland, Bellingham, Modric, all the ones that you would suppose. And they came up with the common denominator. And these are their words, not mine, but it's etched in my mind because I've read it so many times. And they say, it is undeniable that in order to become the world's best players, the ages between 2 and 4 seem to be the most important. I mean, just think about that. They also go on to say that the number one factor and predictor of elite player development, and when they looked at all those players and found, okay, what was the number one most underlying evidence that they could find that was the turning point for them to become such world-class players, was they all started playing in around the homes together, facilitated by a father or a sibling. So again, they get this head start. And so this again is the piece that's missing, the culture piece. But we're spending millions and millions of dollars thinking that this is a problem at the elite space, at the elite academy. But to add support to what you're saying, you're correct. It's a little bit too late. So the reality is that the football world has convinced us that in order to become an elite player, most of the hard work gets done at the elite academy. I saw an interview recently, just the other day, that said that basically Messi, his success is basically mostly done because he wound up at La Masia, the Barcelona academy. I argue the other way around. I argue that I have a pretty good idea he was a pretty good player before he showed up there. And I remember even reading articles, interviews, where Messi was being told how to play a certain way, and he basically gave them the bird and basically ignored them, and he just kept playing and the style and the habits that he had.
Tom, I want to add one thing. Sorry to interrupt you. People that say that is insane about Messi, right? Because you're talking about a player that was playing in Argentina. For Barcelona to bring him from Argentina to Barcelona, the level that he was playing at that age, I think it was 12 or 13, was probably already something. No, it wasn't probably. It was 100% something unbelievable. Like Messi is Messi because of Messi. It's not because of Barcelona. And it's earlier ages, right?
And here's the thing that people don't understand. Because you very rarely hear any players or anybody talking about a player and the success until after they've arrived at an academy. So this is the space, and I've dedicated 10 years of my life to studying all of these players. So almost all the top players, all of them, and even in the United States too. I have in my presentation, I have 3 slides of 3 American examples I use. One is Landon Donovan, one is Clint Dempsey, and one is Christian Pulisic. A little bit different age groups. All of them, football starts at home products. All of them were introduced very early. All 3 of them talk about balls inside the house. All 3 of them talk about the role that the families played. It's undeniable, as the Scottish FA has said. So unfortunately, people get the wrong information. I remember when I was on with Gary from 343.
Yes, Kleiben, yeah.
Yeah, Clarence. And I remember Gary telling me I was talking, and you know me, I talk too much, right? And he told me, slow down, Tom, hold on, because it's important to make sure you're putting out the right information. And he's correct. There's too many people out there. So what he was telling me was I was coming on a point, and he wanted me to slow down and emphasize that point. And the point is that we need to have the right information for people and parents to make decisions. So I think this is the reason why also that you're highlighting, you know, a former national team player and picking apart what his argument is. And it's good to have an argument.
But look at this. I'm going to add more stuff here because the thing is just people need to learn also to know how to question when someone's saying something crazy. The whole point that he's trying to make here is almost as if MLS is like sabotaging young American prospects for foreign prospects for no reason, right? Like MLS would not want to spend. Let me read this last quote here. He said, "There's a reason only young Americans who consistently break through in MLS are outside backs and occasionally center backs." That is not true. That is also a lie, and anyone can look this up. Guys, I'm going to list this again. This season, okay, Mehimedi is breaking through with the New York Red Bulls. He's a central defensive midfielder, central midfielder. Kevin Sullivan is like a winger attacking midfielder. He's breaking through with Philly. Brendan Aronson a few years ago, attacking midfielder. Julian Hall having a breakout season in the New York Red Bulls. He's a forward, a center forward. Right? Taha Habron, he's an attacking midfielder. And then, yeah, you do have like Frankie Westfield. He's a fullback. You have guys like that, but that is not true that the only ones that break through out. What is like, it just doesn't add up, right? It's just, you guys can go and look up yourself. And even a few years ago, like, let's talk about a player that to me was there more due to athleticism, but like, Cade Cowell, he was a winger, and he was given minutes in MLS. Nico Sakidis. It's like, guys, like common sense. Common sense. Just look it up and see that a lot of the players breaking through in MLS are midfielders, forwards. Yeah, they're outside backs. They're center backs. But anyhow, he adds on and he says, meanwhile, they invest millions in midfielders and forwards, making it nearly impossible for a 17, 18, 19-year-old American to play over a 20-year-old South American club. They paid $10 million in multi-million-dollar salary. Again, if we use our brains here for a second, MLS would much rather, if the player was at the standard you need to get the people to watch the game, to win the league, or whatever their goals are, if the player was at that level, they would much rather play the academy player, cheaper salary, cheaper everything. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. There's no, I'm not here to defend MLS. I've been labeled an MLS hater,
you're
and I think
the last person.
I'm one of the last persons to defend MLS. But when it comes to MLS at a professional level, I don't think they're the problem there. I think they're the problem in monopolizing the game. How they deal with community outreach, culture, locally. We talked about, I think MLS teams should partner with Tom and get the football or soccer starts at home program all over the country. Many things can be done there. Maybe that should be a U.S. Soccer Federation thing, regardless. But the whole myth of MLS does not play young Americans, that one's not true, guys. Okay, that one is not true. That's not the problem. And if they could, if there were more good young Americans, I'm sure they would do so. Okay? We could argue Real Madrid doesn't play young Spanish players. That is a fact.
Well, we have that problem everywhere, even here in Japan. In Japan here, the young players, it's a phenomenon not just unique to any particular country. It's unique to football globally. That's the reality.
Yeah, but everyone, look, these are our thoughts. I said everything I had to say here. I brought Tom, which is an expert on this topic, and he has a lot of like research knowledge and time put into it. I try to debunk to the best of my ability some of the crazy takes, but I know this may sound an oversimplification of it, but ultimately, when you think about everything, the big picture, Tom, it comes down to two things: a lack of a incentive for more free academies. That is one. Not the pay to play, but just having more free academies. Which, by the way, I just want to say one thing. Basic economics. If you have more free academies, you're going to suck some of the clients out of the pay to play clubs. So that means less demand. If there's less demand,
100%.
the prices would come down also. That's the other thing.
I completely agree. I think it's a matter of economics as well.
Exactly. So if you have more free academies, what's going to happen is pay to play won't die, but the prices might come down. They might come down a little bit, but that doesn't matter. More free academies. But ultimately, it comes down to culture. It's the Soccer Starts at Home program that you talked about. It's about parents getting their kids to engage and master the ball early on. So when they arrive, whether it is a little local volunteer team, whether it is a pay to play club, whether it is an academy, they arrive very well advanced in the fundamentals rather than you throw a kid in at age 6, 7 to just learn how to play soccer with a coach right there. And then usually what happens in the US, and I've seen this so many times, is when you have a team of like 20 kids, just to wrap up this video, usually like there's like those two Latino kids that have been playing soccer since they're like 3. And then when you put all of them together, all the other ones, you put a game, those two Latino kids just ball hog and dribble past everyone because no one knows how to play. And then all the other kids don't, they exercise, they have fun, which is great, right?
They don't
You want kids to do. But
that's one of the main whole pillars of the football starts at home is that the gap between the best and the least developed, it's too big. So if you've got an under 10 team and you got 2 kids like you just said, it's hard to improve those kids because the other kids aren't pushing that kid to become better.
And the other kids don't improve as well because they don't touch the ball.
No, they don't. They don't get
You
the
need to raise
line.
the floor, not the ceiling. You need to raise the floor.
That's right. And you know, the thing that my last thing too in my closing kind of comment is that, and this kind of myth that, you know, it's all about the methodology and philosophy. The best football nations don't succeed because of methodology. They succeed because they consistently develop players that are capable to execute it. That's it, man. So, and that's the problem that everybody has because now, and don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of Spanish football and everything, but everybody thinks now that we need to import this methodology to our country, to our clubs, there's wonderful things that you can take away from these countries. But the reality is that when you don't have the basement and you're building a house on top of the sand, eventually it's going to come crashing down. And this is what we see every cycle when we're debating again, well, what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, and everyone, hopefully this video, hopefully people don't think we're two idiots here talking about it, because in 4 years, what's going to happen is I think the U.S. could have a very good World Cup in 2030, but eventually the U.S. will lose in the World Cup. We're not going to win the 2030 World Cup, okay? I hate to break it to everyone, but that's what's going to happen. And then everyone's going to start doing the same thing, saying it's our best athletes don't play, it's pay to play, it's the coaches. It's not, okay? It's also not because MLS doesn't play young prospects. MLS does play the young prospects that deserve to be played for the most part. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. Don't forget to drop a like in this video if you made it this far. And Tom Byer, thank you very much once again.
Thank you for having me.